It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but instead, it turned into a stage for whispers, judgment, and cruel laughter. From the moment she walked into the grand hall, the bride could feel the stares. She wore confidence like a crown, her elegance undeniable, yet the groom's family couldn't hide their mocking smiles. They whispered behind their glasses, exchanging remarks about her background, her skin, and even her presence in a family that thought wealth and power meant everything. To them, she wasn't worthy of their son. But what they didn't know was that the woman they were dismissing held far more power than anyone in that room could imagine. The bride had built herself from the ground up, facing struggles most of them could never understand. She was not just another woman marrying into money. She was a woman with influence, respect, and an empire that stretched across industries. But she didn't flaunt it. She never felt the need to. Love, for her, was supposed to be about trust and partnership, not status. She entered this marriage with a heart full of sincerity, never expecting that the very people she was ready to call family would turn against her in silence and smirks. The groom, blinded by the comfort of his family's approval, didn't step in. He stood by, silent, watching the mockery unfold. To him, maybe it was nothing, just small talk, just nerves. But to her, every word cut deep. Still, she kept her head high, her eyes steady, refusing to let them see her break. They had no idea who they were underestimating. Behind her calm smile was a woman who controlled one of the largest business deals in the country. A deal worth nearly $950 million. A deal that her signature alone could seal or shatter. The very family mocking her was desperate for this agreement, though they had no clue she was the one holding the final decision. As the night unfolded, their words grew sharper, their laughter more obvious, pushing her patience to its limit. The bride had a choice to make: ignore the insults for the sake of love, or let them see the true weight of their cruelty. And when she finally made her decision, it left everyone in the room stunned, their world crashing in ways they never imagined. But what exactly did she do? And how did canceling a $950 million deal change everything for the groom's family? The answer would leave them in disbelief. The bride's silence that evening was not weakness, it was calculation. Every smirk and every mocking glance was carefully stored in her memory. She had walked into that marriage with love in her heart, but now she began to see the cracks that had been there all along. The groom's family had always treated her like an outsider, but she thought time would soften their judgment. Instead, their arrogance grew stronger, fed by the belief that their wealth placed them above everyone else. What they didn't know was that their future depended on her in more ways than one. Her journey had not been easy. She was a woman who came from nothing, who knew hunger, long nights, and rejection. She had faced doors slammed in her face, voices telling her she wasn't enough, and eyes that doubted her abilities. But through persistence, she had built something extraordinary, a business empire that spanned industries from real estate to technology. It wasn't just wealth she carried. It was influence, connections, and a reputation that took years of sacrifice to earn. People in boardrooms respected her, CEOs sought her partnership, and investors trusted her judgment. Yet in this room, on what was meant to be her wedding day, she was still mocked as if she had nothing to offer. The groom's family prided themselves on their fortune, but the truth was, their empire was struggling. They needed the $950 million deal that had been quietly set in motion. They believed it was being negotiated by a distant investor, never realizing that the bride was the very person behind it all. She had stayed quiet about her role, wanting to be loved for who she was, not for the wealth she commanded. Now, as she looked at their faces, laughing at her expense, she began to question everything. Could she truly build a life with people who saw her as less than them? And what would happen if they discovered the power they had been mocking all along sat right in front of them, wearing the dress they ridiculed? The truth was about to surface, and when it did, nothing would ever be the same. The night after the wedding ceremony, while the guests enjoyed themselves without restraint, the bride stood near the balcony, quietly watching the city lights. She thought about how far she had come and how different this evening could have been if only respect had been present. She had entered this marriage believing that love could bridge the gap between her world and his. But the sharp words and dismissive laughter of the groom's family replayed in her mind. Every time she tried to brush it off, another memory of their mockery returned, making her question if this was truly the life she wanted to step into. The groom's mother had been the loudest critic, whispering that the bride was only after money, calling her an outsider who didn't fit their family's traditions. His cousins joined in too, mocking her roots, unaware that the very foundation of their family's wealth was on shaky ground. Their business had been losing millions, and their survival depended on the deal they thought would secure their future. To them, the bride was just someone who got lucky enough to marry into their name. But luck had nothing to do with her success. She remembered the nights of struggle when she slept on worn-out sofas, the mornings when she had to convince investors who didn't take her seriously, and the countless sacrifices she made to build her company. She never expected applause, but she had hoped for respect. Instead, she received ridicule. The groom's silence hurt her most. He didn't speak up, didn't defend her when she needed him to. That silence revealed something bigger than his family's arrogance. It showed her where she truly stood in his life. And as she stood on that balcony, the choice before her grew clearer. Would she stay silent for the sake of love? Or would she let the truth of who she was change everything they thought they knew? As the evening dragged on, the atmosphere in the hall shifted. The music played, the guests danced, but underneath the glitter and laughter, the bride could feel the weight of eyes still following her. The groom's family carried themselves as if they had already won some silent battle, mocking her behind polite smiles, convinced she would never be long. What they didn't realize was that their arrogance had pushed her to the edge, and her silence was no longer patience, it was preparation. Whispers traveled quickly across the room. She overheard one of the groom's uncles boasting that their family's business was about to skyrocket because of a deal no one else could touch. Another chimed in about how lucky the groom was to marry a woman who looked the part but had nothing to her name. Each word tightened a knot in her chest, but she kept her expression calm, her back straight as if nothing touched her. Inside, however, her resolve was hardening. The bride glanced toward the groom, hoping he would finally step in, that he would prove her wrong about his silence. But he stood among his cousins, laughing at their jokes, unwilling to disrupt the illusion of family unity. That was the moment she realized the divide between them was far greater than she had imagined. Meanwhile, her phone buzzed in her hand. A message from her board of directors appeared, confirming details about the $950 million deal that had been waiting for her approval. Her signature was the final step, the only thing standing between the groom's family and the lifeline they desperately needed. The irony almost made her smile. She slipped the phone back into her clutch, her mind racing. The family thought they were mocking a powerless bride, when in reality, they were mocking the very person who held their future in her hands. Each laugh, each whisper, only made her decision sharper. The tension in her chest turned into quiet strength. And she knew the moment to act was drawing near. The guests cheered. Glasses clinked, and the groom's family smiled with pride. None of them saw it coming. The storm that was about to break would change everything, and once the truth was revealed, nothing in their world would remain the same, just as the bride steadied herself to make her move. Another layer of truth began to unfold. One of the groom's cousins, emboldened by drinks, let slip something he was not supposed to say. He bragged loudly that the groom's family had never intended to welcome her in, no matter how perfect she seemed. Their plan, he said, was simple. Tolerate her presence until the deal was finalized, then push her aside once their business was secure. The laughter that followed was cruel, careless, and loud enough for her to hear. Her heart pounded as she realized this was never about love in their eyes. It was about using her, though they didn't even know who she truly was. They thought she was powerless, yet she was the very person keeping their empire from collapsing. The betrayal cut deeper than any insult. It wasn't just the family's mockery. It was the thought that the man she loved might have been part of a game from the start. She watched the groom closely, searching his face for a sign of truth or denial. But instead of stopping his cousin or defending her, he lowered his head as if ashamed, yet said nothing. His silence was confirmation enough. If you enjoyed this story and want more intense thrillers and suspenseful adventures, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share it with friends who love a good mystery. Your support helps me bring you more stories just like this one.